My name is Brooke Monroe. I'm 33 years old. And this is the story of how I discovered my husband's betrayal under the shimmer of chandeliers, then showed 200 people exactly who he really was. It was supposed to be perfect. The kind of evening you wait your whole life for. We were at the Westmere Hotel in downtown Seattle, a venue people usually only dream of hosting an event in. I had spent 3 months organizing every detail of our 7th wedding anniversary party. From the ivory linen tablecloths imported from Italy to the Lua Rotorua 2006 champagne I'd sourced from a private cellar in Napa, everything was curated with care and love. Alex Monroe, my husband, stood beside me, looking every bit the successful real estate mogul he was known to be, charming, composed, his smile slightly crooked in that way the media called disarmingly endearing. He was toasting to loyalty, legacy, and love. And as his voice echoed across the ballroom, I felt like I was living in the final scene of a romantic film. Then his phone buzzed. At first, I didn't even glance at it. But when he set it down on the table without muting it, I instinctively reached over to silence the alert. That's when I saw it. The screen lit up with a photo. Burgundy lace. A woman's bare shoulder. Soft, filtered lighting. Underneath, a message. Can't wait for our private meeting tomorrow morning. From Zoe Parker. Zoe. The 25-year-old assistant who had been promoted from temp to project manager just 3 months ago. Zoe, with her designer heels and breathy voice and eyes that always played dumb when I caught her standing a little too close to Alex. For a moment, I couldn't move. I stared at the image, my hand frozen midair above the phone. The air shifted around me. I felt the ground beneath my heels tilt just slightly, just enough to know I would never feel that solid again. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't even flinch. I smiled. I turned back to the guests, laughed at a joke from a banker 2 seats away, and raised my glass to toast with the others. Because right then, I realized this wasn't the time for tears, it was time for strategy. Alex had insisted, early in our marriage, that we sync all our devices for transparency and efficiency. A charming, practical man, he'd said. So I used that same shared ecosystem to access his cloud. And what I found wasn't a mistake or a slip in judgment, it was a year-long symphony of betrayal. Photos. Messages. Itinerary receipts. Round-trip flights to New York while I was taking care of my mother in the hospital. Hotel reservations for 2 during the same weekend he told me he was attending a guys-only real estate summit. A purchase from Lawson Wire on Madison Avenue, $7.80 of lace and lies. And receipts that proved he wasn't even in Austin when he claimed to be. I didn't need to scream to destroy him. 3 minutes later, I quietly accessed the presentation system I had helped design for this very night. I had handpicked the visuals for our slideshow, photos from our wedding in Big Sur, the honeymoon in Capri, our dog running on the beach. But all it took was one tap to replace it with something else. The moment Alex raised his champagne glass to give his big speech, the ballroom lights dimmed and the giant 10-foot LED screen behind him flickered. Instead of our wedding photo, there she was, a Zoe. Burgundy lace. A bedroom background. And the words. Can't wait for our private meeting tomorrow morning. The gasp that rippled across the room felt like a bomb going off underwater. One woman actually dropped her fork. A server nearly tripped trying to back out of the scene. And Alex. Alex dropped his glass. It shattered at his feet, a perfect metaphor for what came next. He turned slowly, saw the screen, then turned back to me. Panic had already consumed his face. And I stayed seated. Calm. Composed. My hand still resting lightly on my phone. I didn't rush the moment. I stood slowly, adjusting the strap of my navy off-shoulder gown, the one Alex once said made me look like a Hitchcock heroine. I walked to the podium where he stood frozen. The microphone still warm from his touch, I took it. Apologies for the interruption, I said, my voice calm as honey. But it seems my husband's personal assistant has already scheduled tomorrow morning's meeting, without me. There were chuckles, some awkward, some stunned. Someone at the back whispered, "Oh my God." I heard phones snapping pictures, someone starting a video recording. "Oh, and the lingerie?" I added, "paid for with our shared credit card." The same week Alex told me he was at a conference in Austin. Alex grabbed the mic, desperation coating his voice. "Brooke, this isn't what you think." I turned to him. "No, Alex. It's exactly what I think. And you can keep talking. But just know, every single person in this room now knows who you really are." More murmurs. A few gasps. One woman actually covered her daughter's eyes. I walked off stage slowly, heels clicking against the marble floor like the last ticking seconds of his career. I passed through clusters of people, some too shocked to speak, others avoiding my gaze out of sheer discomfort. But a few looked at me with something else. Respect. I reached the lobby just as Alex caught up to me. "Brooke, wait. We need to talk." I turned and looked at him. Really looked at him. "Touch me again, and I'll let hotel security handle it." "You'll regret this," he said, eyes narrowing. "You don't know what I'm capable of." I smiled. But there was no warmth in it. "And I didn't know you were capable of that either," I replied. "But now I do. And I'll respond accordingly." Then I turned. Pulled out my phone. To Evelyn. Subject, urgent. Begin execution. I didn't go home that night. I checked into the Ashton Hotel downtown. The suite overlooked the Space Needle. The room smelled like lavender and clean sheets and new beginnings. I slipped off the navy dress, hung it neatly in the closet, and sat by the window. And then I opened my laptop. The laptop whirred to life in the quiet of the Ashton Hotel suite. The glow of the screen lit up my face as I sat cross-legged on the couch, barefoot, still wearing the remnants of mascara I hadn't cried off. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the clarity that follows a controlled detonation. Everything had exploded. But somehow, I was still here. And I wasn't done. I logged into the shared iCloud account Alex and I had set up in the early years of our marriage. Back then, he'd called it a symbol of trust, no secrets, full transparency. It was practical for our careers, him in real estate and me in event planning. I could access our family calendar, our bank accounts, his emails. And now, this tool of transparency would become the very knife I would use to cut through the lies. There was a folder labeled hold_pending. Hidden, but not encrypted. Just forgotten. He really thought I'd never look. Or maybe he thought I wouldn't understand what I found if I did. He'd always underestimated me. The first document was a draft divorce agreement. I read it, line by line, through a growing wave of nausea. He had it all planned, a quiet separation right after a massive merger with a Texas investment group. He would keep our shared properties, his shares in Monroe and Rain Partners, and even our mutual savings account under the pretense of liquidity protection. The plan didn't involve a scandal. It involved a whisper-quiet exit, with me painted as the passive, loyal wife who would never dare speak out. There was a line in an internal memo from his lawyer. "Brooke will be fine. She's not confrontational. She might push back, but she'll comply to protect her public image." I felt my hands clench on the trackpad. Not confrontational? Try humiliated, cornered, and quietly loading the bullet into my own rifle. The next file I opened was a list. 3 names. Women. All former assistants. All exited quietly over the last 5 years. No formal reasons for their departures. But each name was attached to a settlement agreement, complete with non-disclosure clauses and payouts from an internal employee support fund. A fund I had personally signed off on 2 years ago, thinking it was for bereavement leave and maternity-related costs. I had unknowingly funded hush money. I clicked on a chat log snippet attached to one of the files. It was from Alex's executive assistant, sent to a legal team contact. He's handling it. Knows how to keep her mouth shut. Just make sure she doesn't stir anything up before the Ellison deal closes. Her. Me. I was her. I closed the laptop with a sickening click and stared out the floor-to-ceiling window toward the Space Needle. All the pieces were falling into place. His rush to promote Zoe. His distancing from me this past quarter. His sudden password changes. And now, this plan to discard me after the deal closed, when the image of the polished, supportive wife was no longer necessary. He was going to leave me with nothing. Unless I acted first. I texted Evelyn Ross, my closest friend from college, now one of Seattle's top divorce attorneys and a legend in courtrooms where rich men thought charm would win over evidence. Need to meet tomorrow 8 a.m. Have documents. Urgent. She replied in under a minute. Bring everything. And Brooke, this time, no more mercy. That night, I barely slept. I couldn't. My heart was racing, but not from despair, from calculation. I was moving through the stages of grief and landed squarely in vengeance. No more illusion. No more waiting for kindness or closure. I was done. At 7:45 the next morning, I stood in Evelyn's glass-walled office on the 22nd floor of the Bryant Center. She sat across from me, flipping through the files I had printed. She plugged in the USB drive I'd loaded with sync data from Alex's devices, emails, receipts, chat logs. The air around her was sharp with legal adrenaline. Finally, she looked up. If Alex thought you weren't capable of striking back, she said, then today is the day he made the most catastrophic mistake of his life. We created a strategy right then. Evelyn filed an emergency financial freeze on our joint accounts. We initiated a formal inquiry to Monroe and Rain's HR department demanding records of all discretionary employee payments. And we prepared the first motion to request a forensic audit of the so-called Employee Support Fund. By noon, I returned to our house in Fremont. Alex wasn't home. His Tesla was gone, probably still parked outside the Westmere from the night before. I took the chance. I changed every password on the smart home system, the cameras, locks, even the thermostat. I revoked his access completely. When prompted for a new code, I entered 1021. October 21st. The day the world saw the truth. I walked into his home office, which always smelled too sterile for a man as messy as Alex. I knew where he kept his backup drives, a small metal case in the bottom drawer. I found a USB labeled Legacy. My stomach churned as I plugged it in. At first, it was boring. Payroll spreadsheets. Template emails. But then, a folder marked Henderson 2018. Henderson, my maiden name. My father's company. I opened it and felt the breath leave my body. Inside was a report detailing a sexual harassment complaint at my father's firm, filed by a young female employee against a senior partner. The report said, to protect reputation and strategic value, the board has decided to resolve the matter internally via a financial agreement. And there it was. My father's signature. Richard Henderson. Below that, another memo, from Alex to his attorney. Marrying Brooke has provided a trustworthy public buffer. If Henderson 2018 resurfaces, she'll take the initial hit. Her public persona is clean. She'll hold the media line. I stared at the words, but they didn't blur. I saw every single one, clear and sharp like a blade pressed to my throat. It wasn't just Alex who had used me. My family had too. A knock on the front glass door startled me. I checked the camera. Alex. With a hotel security guard behind him. I tapped the speaker system. Brooke. Open the door. We need to talk. I stayed silent. Watching him pound the keypad, desperation creeping into every move. "You can't do this," he hissed. "You're ruining your reputation. You think the media's gonna side with you? You leaked lingerie photos, you'll get labeled as unstable, bitter. You're an event planner, Brooke. Nobody hires a scandal." Then, softer. "Baby." I panicked. "I love you. We've been through worse. We can fix this." I stared at the monitor. My face unreadable. "If you don't open this door," he growled, "I'll do something. You know I can. I'll drag your father into the 2018 scandal. You know it was never fully buried. You won't just lose your career, you'll take the Henderson family down with you." I hit record. Then texted Evelyn. "He just threatened to expose the Henderson case. I have proof. Audio attached." She replied within minutes. "Good. He just made this a war. And we're going to win it." 3 weeks after the night I detonated my marriage on the ballroom stage, I stood in front of a very different crowd, this time not to celebrate an illusion, but to shatter a pattern. The Pine Hill Event Center wasn't glamorous like Westmere, but it held something more powerful: truth. That morning, I stood behind a modest podium, my palms slightly damp but my voice calm and steady. "Thank you all for being here," I began, eyes scanning the room of 70 faces. "I'm Brooke Monroe. And this is not a press conference, this is the beginning." Around me sat women of all backgrounds. Former colleagues. Female attorneys. Startup founders. A few silent supporters from Alex's old circles who had reached out anonymously after what happened. And in the front row, Claire Donovan, the investigative journalist from the Seattle Mirror who had contacted me after my Startup Week speech. She had said, "I don't think you're the only one." She was right. That was the seed that became the Haven Project. I had built it quietly in the weeks following the fallout, a non-profit initiative to support women who faced coercion, abuse, or silent punishment in corporate environments. No fanfare. No huge press launches. Just real stories, real support, and a place for women to speak without fear. That day was our first official workshop. And I never expected what happened next. 2 women stood up from the back of the room. Their hands trembled slightly, but their eyes didn't waver. One of them spoke. "I'm Erin Caldwell," she said, voice strong. "I worked as an executive assistant at Monroe and Rain Partners in 2021. I'd like to share a story." Erin recounted weekend work requests that blurred professional lines, sudden reprimands when she resisted, and a demotion that was never explained. Her voice cracked when she said, "They told me I didn't fit the energy of the new culture. That was their excuse." Then came Talia Jensen. Fired after refusing to share a room during an overnight business trip Alex had personally scheduled. "I still remember the silence when I walked out of that hotel lobby alone," she said. "It felt like I was walking away from my future." The room fell completely quiet. I could see the moment it clicked for the audience, these weren't isolated stories. These were coordinated silencings. And Alex wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a pattern wrapped in polished charm and $1,000 suits. After they finished, I took the mic again. No theatrics. Just truth. "I brought receipts," I said, lifting a folder. "Email transcripts. Misused invoices. Financial files showing internal hush payouts masked as support fund transfers." Claire Donovan gave a small nod. I'd already shared the documents with her. She was preparing a multi-part exposé called Behind the Office Glass. What neither of us expected was how fast things would spiral. Within 72 hours of that event, the Securities and Exchange Commission launched a preliminary investigation into Monroe and Rain. Evelyn had already submitted every piece of data I'd collected, including Alex's secret correspondence, settlement payout logs, and that internal chat where they called me not a threat. Well, here I was. Not just a threat. A fuse. And the explosion had begun. By the end of that week, Monroe and Rain's Seattle headquarters was sealed for investigation. Their website went dark. PR firms scrambled. One board member issued a pathetic, vague apology video that only made things worse. The media latched onto the story like wildfire. Claire's series ran on the Seattle Mirror homepage for 6 consecutive days. The name Alex Monroe was no longer the golden gentleman of West Coast real estate. He was now the poster boy for corporate rot in a tailored suit. I couldn't scroll social media without seeing hashtags like #MonroeExposed, #BelieveBrooke, and my personal favorite, #LingerieGate. What I hadn't expected was the ripple effect. Law firms in Seattle started offering pro bono support for workplace harassment victims. A local tech company reached out and asked if I would help design a protection policy for their women employees. And universities started inviting me to speak to graduating business students about ethics and power. Me. The woman who once thought staying quiet made me stronger. But the storm wasn't done. One chilly afternoon, as I left a panel discussion at the University of Washington School of Law, I received an email from a strange Gmail address. From zoeparker.legal@gmail.com. Subject: I'm not who you think I am. I need to talk. The body was just one sentence. Not as the other woman, as a victim. My breath caught. Zoe. The woman in the lingerie. The one I had publicly exposed. The same woman who, for a year, had looked me in the eyes at board dinners and said, "Let me know if you ever need help with Alex's schedule." I didn't know if I wanted to scream or cry. But something in me softened. I responded. Red Elm Cafe. Saturday. 2 p.m. No press. Just us. I arrived 10 minutes early. Chose the booth near the back window, where late afternoon sunlight spilled across the table like warm honey. Red Elm smelled like cinnamon waffles and quiet apologies. Zoe walked in exactly on time. No makeup. A white shirt. No glamour. Just her. She slid into the seat across from me and placed a small USB drive on the table. "This has everything," she said. "Every message. Every recording. Some of it, you don't know yet." She paused, voice hoarse. "He threatened me. Repeatedly. Told me if I didn't shut up, I'd lose my job, my future." I was scared. I thought I was in control at first, and then I realized I was just the next in a long line. I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't my rival anymore. She was a girl who got caught in a machine and didn't know how to get out. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said, voice cracking. "I just want to help. And maybe. I want to stand on the right side of this." I took the USB. Slipped it into my purse. Then I did something I never thought I would do. I reached across the table and took her hand. Because we both knew what it felt like to be deceived, diminished, and nearly erased. By Monday morning, the Seattle Financial paper ran a photo of Alex leaving Monroe and Rain's HQ, suit wrinkled. Face drawn. The headline? Monroe resigns as CEO amid federal investigation. Everything he'd built was crumbling. Not because I lied. But because I finally told the truth. But the final blow came from a place I never expected. Dinner. At my parents' house. The roast beef sat on the Wedgwood china, untouched. The gold-trimmed linen napkins were perfectly folded, as always. My mother, Margaret Henderson, had prepared the table with meticulous care, as if starch and porcelain could hold together what was cracking beneath the surface. I sat at the end, posture straight, hands folded in my lap like a schoolgirl waiting for a reprimand. Across from me was my father, Richard Henderson, CEO Emeritus of Henderson Investments. His gaze was distant, fixed on the glass of Pinot Noir he hadn't yet touched. Not once had he looked me in the eyes. You have any idea how far you've dragged the Henderson name? My mother finally said, her voice low and measured like a blade held steady at my throat. I didn't blink. You mean with the scandal I discovered on my husband's backup drive? I replied. Or the one this family buried in 2018? Her jaw tightened. You don't know the full context. I know what's on the signed PDF, Mother, I said, slowly, my voice a fraction above a whisper. I know you used me as a PR shield. Just like Alex did. My father winced, finally raising his eyes. But he didn't speak. Cowardice is silent like that, especially when it wears cufflinks and hides behind trust funds. My mother wasn't finished. You think you're noble? She hissed. You think you've done something brave? All you've done is caused investors to pull out. Your father's next project is on hold. The scholarship fund is paused because of bad press. So that was it. Not a word about the women. Not a word about the lies. Just the inconvenience of exposure. I stood slowly, pushing the chair back without a word. This family didn't fall because I shined a light on its cracks, I said. It fell because you all painted over rot with polish for so long, it only took one gust of wind to bring it down. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. I simply walked away, heels clicking against their marble floor like punctuation marks in a closing argument. That afternoon, I returned to the Haven Project office. Evelyn and I had just finished a strategy meeting with our new legal support team when my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated for a beat, then answered. Ms. Monroe, a man's voice said, calm and professional. This is Ethan Larkin, Managing Director at Larkin & Wells Partners. We met 2 years ago at the Harbor Forum. I remembered. Barely. He'd been one of Alex's fiercest rivals. Clean-cut, sharp eyes. The kind of man who studied before speaking. I followed how you handled everything, he said. Very impressive. We're expanding our corporate ethics and compliance division. I'd like to invite you to lead it. I almost laughed. Because I'm Alex Monroe's ex-wife? He didn't flinch. Because you stood your ground when everyone else would have retreated. Because you understand that ethics only means something when they're lived out loud. No MBA teaches that. I said I'd think about it. He told me not to take too long. The system needs people like you, he said. So does this city. He hung up. But the echo of that call followed me the rest of the day. 2 mornings later, an unexpected email landed in my inbox. It was from the Westmere Hotel, the same place where the champagne glass shattered and Zoe's photo lit up a 10-foot screen. Subject line, on behalf of the management team, a collaboration invitation. They were requesting me, to design and direct their upcoming Westmere Winter Gala, their most prestigious event of the year. The email ended with this. We don't just want a planner. We need someone with the courage to make a statement. And the name Brooke Monroe now means more than just a surname. I stared at that line. Then I clicked accept. Because I wasn't done. The next few weeks passed in a blur of forward motion. I took the role at Larkin & Wells as well, on a part-time advisory basis. I helped them draft internal policy frameworks and create anonymous reporting systems. Every clause I wrote carried the weight of what I'd learned the hard way. I moved out of our old Fremont home and into a smaller, warmer place, a 12th-floor penthouse in Queen Anne, Seattle. Nothing extravagant. White brick walls, a window with a view of Elliott Bay, a kitchen just big enough for 2. I decorated it myself. No more design consultants. No more trying to impress people I couldn't trust. I planted lavender in a clay pot near the window. Took a jazz class at night. Painted my walls in shades I actually liked. This was my after. And I was alive in it. 2 weeks later, I hosted a quiet dinner. Evelyn arrived first, always immaculate in cream tones. She brought a raspberry tart and a new book on women in corporate law. Claire Donovan brought a bottle of French Red and the manuscript for her award-nominated series. Zoe came too, her hair in a low bun, a simple black shirt. No masks. Just a woman trying to rebuild. And Ethan. Ethan Larkin. In a gray cashmere coat and a look in his eyes that held neither pity nor possession. Just quiet respect. We didn't toast to loyalty or legacy. No speeches. Just raised our glasses in silent recognition of something most people never notice, survival. 2 weeks after that, I returned to the Westmere Hotel for the first time since the night that shattered everything. But this time, I wasn't walking in as a wife. I was the creative director of the gala. The ballroom had been redesigned under my vision, sleek, modern, honest. The chandeliers were replaced with abstract light fixtures, and the LED wall now displayed art instead of vanity. As I did a final walkthrough, I heard someone behind me say my name. I turned. And there he was. Alex. Thinner. Suit rumpled. His eyes tired in a way that no amount of cologne or charm could hide. He stopped a few feet away, respectful of the space between us. "You're doing well," he said quietly. "Better than well, it seems." I met his eyes. "I'm doing fine. Thank you." He pulled out an envelope and held it out to me. "It's not legal," he said. "Just an apology. What I should have said long ago." I didn't take it. "Alex," I said, calm as moonlight, "I don't need an apology. I just need you to leave the women you hurt alone. And if you have any decency left, cooperate with the investigations." He hesitated, then nodded slightly. "You've changed," he said. "No," I replied. "I've just rinsed off the dust that men like you tried to bury me under." He walked away. I stayed. And the gala? It was perfect. Not because of the decor. Not because of the guest list. But because I had walked into the same room where I once lost everything. And reclaimed it on my own terms. The Westmere Winter Gala sparkled under the soft glow of strategically placed lights that danced like stars across the walls. It was elegant. Bold. Modern. Everything I once believed I needed someone else to create beside me, I had done entirely on my own. But the real magic of that night wasn't the decor. It was the quiet that settled over me when I stood alone on the second-floor balcony, a glass of champagne in one hand, the lights of Seattle glittering below like scattered diamonds. No longer watched. No longer bracing for judgment or betrayal. Just being. It felt like standing in the center of my own power. A far cry from the woman who once wondered whether silence was strength. Inside, the evening went smoothly. Guests mingled. Music swelled. The new hotel management team shook my hand repeatedly, thanking me for helping them redefine Westmere's future. I didn't smile out of politeness, I smiled because I meant it. I had rebuilt everything from rubble, and I hadn't lost myself in the process. That was the miracle. But closure is never truly neat. A few days after the gala, I received a final email from Alex's former attorney, ironically the same one who helped draft the divorce agreement I was never meant to see. It confirmed that Alex had formally withdrawn from all board roles, was cooperating with federal investigators, and had been advised not to contact me or any former employees ever again. But attached was a scanned copy of his handwritten letter, the one he tried to hand me at the hotel. Against my better judgment, I opened it. "Brooke. This is not a plea for forgiveness. I don't expect it. But if there's anything left between us that ever mattered, then know this, I never thought you'd leave. You were always the anchor. The adult in the room. The calm. I thought you'd stay, even through the cracks. But you didn't. You walked away, and the silence you left behind was louder than anything I've ever heard. I deserved it. I know that now. Do whatever you need to do to heal. I hope you find peace. Maybe, someday, I'll learn what that word actually means. Alex. I folded the paper, placed it back in the envelope, and slid it into a drawer I no longer opened. Not out of cruelty, but because I didn't need it anymore. I had my peace. And I wasn't looking back. A week later, I stood in a different kind of room, sunlight streaming through high windows, the faint smell of coffee and lavender in the air. It was our third official Haven Project workshop. Over 100 attendees this time. Word was spreading. Women were stepping forward with courage I wished I'd had 10 years ago. Some were still whispering their stories, but more and more, I heard voices rising. Erin and Talia now led support circles. Zoe had joined as a volunteer, quiet, humble, never seeking praise. Just doing the work. Claire Donovan's investigative series was nominated for a National Journalism Award. Evelyn was in high demand, running seminars across the country on how to protect whistleblowers and pursue ethical litigation. And me? I was asked to speak on a university panel about rebuilding after betrayal, not just marriage, but systemic betrayal. I called the speech after the shatter. And I ended it with the line I'd carried through everything. You don't need to set the world on fire to be powerful. Sometimes, the most radical thing a woman can do is simply stand back up. The audience stood. Some wiped tears. Some stood in still silence. And I knew I hadn't just become someone who survived. I had become a map for others to find their way out. Later that night, I returned to my apartment. There was no echoing silence anymore. Jazz played softly in the background. My lavender plant leaned toward the window, soaking in the last blush of sun. I poured myself a glass of red wine and pulled a small notebook from my desk. It was the first time I'd written anything down for myself in years. I flipped to a blank page. At the top, I wrote, "How to start over without apologizing for it." And underneath that, the first line flowed like breath. Step 1, believe that peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the presence of truth. The next day, a letter arrived by courier, hand-delivered, gold-embossed seal. It was from the governor's office. An official commendation for my work through Haven and my leadership in promoting corporate transparency in Washington state. At first, I stared at it in disbelief. Then I laughed. Not bitterly. Not mockingly. But with wonder. This was the same state that once recognized me only as the wife of Alex Monroe. The woman who smiled politely at luncheons and signed guest books at benefit galas. Now, I was something else entirely. Brooke Monroe, director, advocate, survivor, builder. And when I saw the words, "We honor your courage and resilience," I finally let myself cry, not because I needed to, but because I could. Later that evening, I received a message from Ethan Larkin. "Brooke, we're hosting a national summit on corporate ethics and leadership this summer. I'd like you to keynote. No fancy speeches, just your story, unfiltered. I can't think of anyone else who embodies integrity like you do. Think about it." Ethan. I responded with one word. Yes. Because finally, I knew something Alex, my parents, and even I once didn't. When the world tries to bury you in silence, your voice becomes your greatest weapon. Summer in Seattle has a way of softening even the hardest edges. The mornings start misty, quiet, and then somewhere between your second coffee and the mid-afternoon sun, the whole city opens like a flower. It was the perfect backdrop for something new. The National Summit on Corporate Ethics was held at the Cascade Conference Center, a sleek modern structure with glass walls and cedar accents. Walking into the main hall that day, I didn't feel like someone attending a speaking engagement. I felt like someone walking through the last door that had ever tried to keep her out. Ethan Larkin greeted me with that same quiet steadiness he always carried. No pretense, no flattery. Just a man who had watched my fall and rise, and respected both. I still think about what you said at Pine Hill, he told me, as he led me backstage. About not needing to set the world on fire to be powerful. That line stuck. I smiled. It wasn't fire they were afraid of, it was me knowing I didn't need them to light it. He nodded. Then it's time the rest of the world heard it too. I stepped onto the stage to a crowd of over 800 business leaders, legal experts, nonprofit founders, and survivors. The screen behind me didn't show a logo or company name. It showed one word in clean white text. Enough. I began not with a list of accomplishments, but with a memory. The night I showed my husband's betrayal on a 10-foot LED screen behind him, I said slowly, was not the night I became powerful. It was the night I remembered I already was. There wasn't a single cough, not a single phone glance. Just breathless silence. I spoke for 27 minutes. Not just about Alex or my family's betrayal. But about the systems that feed off of women's silence. About the way corporate cultures reward appearances over ethics. About how institutions treat truth like a liability. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't need to. By the time I stepped off stage, I had 42 new business cards in my coat pocket. But what mattered more were the emails and handshakes from women, CEOs, interns, single moms, and senior VPs, who said the same thing, I didn't know I was allowed to speak until you did. A week later, Forbes Women published a feature on the Haven Project. Claire Donovan's exposé was optioned for a documentary. And I was invited to co-author a book with Evelyn Ross, part memoir, part blueprint, called Rewrite the Rules, When Women Stop Whispering. Still, the most surreal moment didn't come in a boardroom or a spotlight. It came in a grocery store. I was picking out Honeycrisp apples when I heard a voice behind me. Ms. Monroe? I turned, expecting a stranger. It was the hotel manager from the Westmere. Not the one who'd fired the tech guy after my slide appeared, but the new one. Young, brown-skinned, glasses perched low on his nose. I just wanted to say, he continued, that night, when you stood at the podium and exposed everything, my sister was in the catering team. She said it changed her life. Made her quit a toxic job the next day. He smiled. She starts culinary school next month. She says she owes you her courage. I swallowed hard. She always had it. She just needed to see someone else use theirs. He nodded and walked away. I stood there in the produce aisle, apples forgotten, and felt it. Legacy. Not in headlines. Not in contracts. In people. That night, I went home, lit a lavender candle, and opened an email from Zoe. She had just been accepted into a graduate program for nonprofit administration. The Haven Project had written her a recommendation. In her message, she said, I still wake up some days wondering how I ended up where I did. But now I wake up wanting to help others get out sooner than I did. You taught me that silence isn't loyalty. It's just fear. Thank you for turning your fear into something fierce. I closed the laptop, leaned back, and let the weight of it all sink in. Not everything had been healed. My parents and I still hadn't spoken beyond formal exchanges. Alex's trial loomed. And there were days when I still woke up feeling the echo of shame I hadn't asked for. But I wasn't carrying it alone anymore. And I wasn't carrying it quietly. As autumn approached, I took a walk through Queen Anne's quiet streets. Leaves fell in crimson waves across the sidewalks. I passed a group of college students discussing startup ideas, two women chatting about a workplace policy change because of that Brooke Monroe case, and a little girl walking with her mom, telling her she wanted to grow up to be someone who says the truth even when it's hard. My heart clenched. I was no one's icon. No one's hero. But maybe, just maybe, I was proof. Proof that survival doesn't make you hard. It makes you whole. 6 months to the day since I shattered the illusion of my marriage on the ballroom stage, I stood in my small queen and kitchen folding linen napkins for a dinner I'd invited exactly 5 people to. There were no photographers, no sponsors, no press releases. Just real people. Real stories. Real healing. I set the table with mismatched plates I'd collected from flea markets. Candles and old wine bottles. A jazz record playing softly. My lavender plant was still alive by some miracle, leaning slightly toward the open window. Everything was simple. But this time, simplicity felt like luxury. Zoe arrived first, her hair longer now, wearing a t-shirt that read, "Unapologetic." She brought peach cobbler and a book on non-profit grant writing. Evelyn came straight from court, in heels too high for anyone but her, carrying a bottle of champagne and case files for our next strategy meeting. Claire brought her award. Yes, she won. She placed the heavy glass trophy on my windowsill like it belonged there. And then there was Ethan. He arrived last, in a dark navy sweater and no tie, holding a box of tea and a handwritten note. It wasn't romantic, not yet. But it was something that lived between respect and possibility. We laughed, we cried, we toasted, not to vengeance, but to starting over. No one mentioned Alex's name. We didn't need to. Because by then, he was no longer the point. What he did to me, what my own parents did by using me as a shield, what corporate America did by teaching women that survival means silence, none of that defined me anymore. What defined me was what I chose next. And what I chose was this. To build a life that no one could take credit for but me. The following week, I met with a group of first-year law students at the University of Washington. One girl raised her hand and asked, "How did you not lose your mind when you found out everything? The betrayal, the manipulation, the way your own husband tried to erase you?" I paused. Then answered. I did lose it. Quietly. In my car. In a hotel bathroom. In the middle of the night while the rest of the world slept. But I also realized something. You don't have to be okay all the time to win. You just have to keep standing up. Even if you shake when you do. The students didn't clap. They sat still. Absorbing it. Good. Because I hadn't come to inspire them. I'd come to warn them that you don't survive by being brave once. You survive by being brave every day you remember your worth. By December, the Haven Project had grown beyond what I could have imagined. We had chapters in 3 cities. A hotline. A legal clinic. Partnerships with 2 Fortune 500 companies that, 6 months ago, wouldn't return my calls. And then one morning, as frost traced the windows of my apartment, I received a letter in the mail. Heavy envelope. No return address. Inside was a typed note, and signed. Your story saved more than just your own name. It gave others language for something they thought they had to carry forever. This wasn't just revenge. It was a reckoning. And you led it with grace. May you always walk forward, even when the world would rather you sit still. There was nothing else inside. I placed it beside my notebook. The same notebook where I'd once written how to start over without apologizing for it. I flipped to the back and wrote something new. Step 20, Rebirth doesn't ask for permission. It just begins. And then I signed it. Brooke Monroe. Because I had earned that name again. Not as someone's wife. Not as someone's daughter. Not as a whisper. But as a woman who chose not to disappear. I stepped out onto my balcony later that night, Seattle's skyline flickering like it had something to say. The air was cold, sharp, bracing. I pulled my coat tighter and closed my eyes. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel like I was standing on the edge of anything. I felt arrived. Not with a bang. But with the steady, echoing steps of a woman who burned the bridge behind her, not to punish, but to make sure she never walked that path again. What do you think of Brooke's journey, her strength, her silence, her roar? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you've ever stood back up after being broken, this channel is for you. Subscribe to Revenge Echoes, where every story begins in betrayal, but ends in something far more powerful.